Hello, I'm Robert Royal, and this podcast is one of a series in the series that we're calling Faith Under Siege. It's jointly produced by Faith and Reason Institute, of which I'm president in Washington, D.C., and Aid to the Church in Need USA, which is located in New York City. I want to encourage you, everyone listening or watching this podcast, please look into Aid to the Church in Need, which I think is one of the best organizations in the world trying to preserve not only Christian religious liberty, religious liberty for everyone in the various countries that they operate in. And they have offices in over 30 different countries around the world. We're recording on April 14, 2026. Pope Leo is at the moment that we're recording. He's in Algeria, and he's going to be visiting 4 different countries in Africa over an 11-day period. And I'm very, very happy that we have with us today Uzay Bulut, who wrote one of the most interesting articles in English that I saw about this papal trip before it started. She's originally from Turkey. She's living now in Greece. I myself am in Rome today. You can probably tell from that unnamed cardinal behind me. But we thought it would be good to talk with her about what the Pope is likely to encounter in these 4 countries that he's going to. He's going to Algeria. He's going to Camerún. He's going to Equatorial Guinea. And he's also going to Angola. Uzay, can you just tell us a bit? I think very few English speakers know very much about any of these countries. Algeria, maybe a little bit because of the French influence that was there. But ever since the French left in the 1960s, it's been a country that's been pretty troubled. It's been dominated by various Islamic factions. It even went through something that, like what you could call a civil war. Most of the Christians who lived in Algeria, and there were probably between 1 and 2 million when it was a department of France. Most of them have left and went back to France. But there are still several tens of thousands there. Pope Leo, I think, is visiting because he's an Augustinian, and St. Augustine of Hippo, he's supposed to be in Hippo today. St. Augustine of Hippo was from that region, and there's a big, beautiful basilica in Algiers itself. So can you just give us a little bit about what Algeria is like these days and what you believe he's likely to encounter? And, can he make any progress in helping that country to be more peaceful and to be more open to the various religious groups that are there?
Yes, today Algeria is one of the world's most oppressive countries for Christians and other non-Muslims. And we're talking about a country which used to be majority Christian from the 2nd century until the 7th century Arab Islamic conquest of Algeria. The country was majority Christian and a very important center of ancient Christianity. But today, the citizens of Algeria don't have the freedom to leave Islam and choose another religion or no religion. I mean, they can try, and many of them do that, but there are always consequences such as investigation, prosecutions, arrest, and imprisonment. And this is due to 2 laws that were passed in the country beginning in 2006. And as a result of these laws, all Protestant evangelical churches have been shut down, and the Catholic charity organization called Caritas was shut down. And within the last 3 years, over 50 Christians were prosecuted, and some of them received prison sentences and fines. Why is this happening? Because in the eyes of the Algerian government, there are only 2 identities that are promoted: Arabness, the Arab identity, and Islam. And even the government authorities openly say that an Algerian can only be Muslim, which means that Christianity, this leaves very little space for other religions, including Christianity. In 2006, government adopted a new law called the Ordinance of 2006. And in 2012, there was another law on associations. And as a result of this legal framework, it is now almost impossible for Christians to open new churches or to register their churches or places of worship as legal, valid places of worship. So they can only meet in private homes or outdoors or online. But even when they do that, there are consequences and extreme risks, such as house raids, arrests, imprisonments, and interrogations. They are jailed, they are given prison sentences and heavy fines. So basically, the people of Algeria do not have the freedom to choose their religion and to practice their religion safely and freely. So I hope that the Pope will address these issues in public and be a voice of all these persecuted, voiceless Christians in the country.
Let me ask you a question. He went to this very beautiful old French basilica in Algiers yesterday, and there's a prayer service there, and there seemed to be a lot of um, both religious and secular figures who were there. And he recalled, I wrote an earlier book about the 20th century martyrs. There were 18 actually Christians who were killed, murdered in Algeria during the 1990s. And there's actually 7 Trappists who had from Tiberine, who had their heads cut off. Is it the case that a place like that basilica can operate, or is that even controlled in the way that you were just talking about?
Well, churches in Algeria, all of them, they have no freedom to proselytize. Proselytizing is considered an offense, a crime, according to the constitution of the country. And those who engage in proselytizing, meaning sharing their faith with people, giving a Bible to an Algerian person, all these things and more are considered crimes, and those who engage in them can be sentenced to prison for up to 5 years. And blasphemy, this is what the Constitution is talking about. The crime of blasphemy, apostasy, or insulting Islam, those are also crimes, and those who are accused and convicted of these crimes can be sentenced to up to 3 to 5 years in jail. So, of course, no church in Algeria has the freedom to reach out to a Muslim or talk with a Muslim freely, safely, in real life or online, and share their faith and share the gospel with them. And if they decide to leave Islam and become a Christian, those people will end up in trouble. They might be arrested and jailed, and some of them are forced to leave the country. There's a case that I would like to talk about if we have time. And
Sure.
his name is Silimane Bouhas, and he is a former Muslim and a Christian convert. And he was arrested in 2006, and he was sentenced to prison. And then after his release from prison for his Facebook posts, which were deemed offensive to Islam and its prophet. And then after his release from prison in 2018, he fled to Tunisia and he applied for asylum. I'm talking about this case as an example to all those who are suffering and who are oppressed and persecuted for their Christian faith. And he fled to Tunisia. He was granted refugee status there by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. But then when he was in Tunisia in 2022, he was abducted by Algerian authorities and taken back to Algeria, where he was tortured and arrested again and jailed. And he was given 3 years imprisonment for membership in a terrorist organization and undermining national territorial integrity of Algeria. And he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. In 2024, he was released from prison, and today he has no civil rights. He issued an appeal for help, and I would like to read his appeal, hoping that the Pope will decide to help him. It's very short, just a few sentences. He says, I have become stateless in my own country of Algeria. I have no identity documents. I am deprived of all my rights. The Algerian authorities refuse to issue me documents proving my identity. Even my retirement pension has been withdrawn. I am issuing a distress call to all international bodies and to all people of goodwill to come to my aid. So his name's Simon Bouhafs, and this is what happened to him for leaving Islam, for becoming a Christian, and sharing his religious opinions on Facebook. So this is just an example, but there are so many victims like this Within the last 3 years, over 50 Christians were prosecuted. And one of them is the vice president of the Protestant Church of Algeria. His name is Youssef Oruhmane. And he was also sentenced to a year in prison for illegal worship, meaning he held a religious service in a building that was not built for that purpose. So all these people and more, they are arrested for example, carrying a Bible in their bag, for having a Christian first name, or for giving a Bible to a Muslim, for writing a message about their Christian faith on Facebook, on social media. For these crimes, alleged crimes, they are punished, and they lose their civil rights, basically.
Yeah,
Oh,
this is really
I
terrible,
have
and
yeah.
unfortunately, it happens too much in many other countries too, where there's a kind of a radical Islam present. Look, we have to move on. I mean, this is wonderful. The Pope has been talking about being a pilgrim of peace there, but I hope that he's also a pilgrim of truth telling, because the things that you're talking about are a part of the reality of that part of the world. And it's important that however much he can do so, that he makes it clear to people in Algeria and about in the rest of the world about what's going on. And that's why I think your witness is so important. But let's move on. He's going to be moving to Cameroon. Cameroon is another one of these complicated countries that actually people in the English-speaking world know very little about. It's very troubled these days between French speakers and English speakers. Could you tell us a bit about the situation that he's likely to find when he goes to Cameroon?
Well, there are two war situations that are going on in the country right now. One of them is a jihadist insurgency in the far north region of Cameroon. Islamic terrorists such as Boko Haram and the Islamic State are targeting Christians there. Cameroon is actually majority Christian, and it has deep Christian roots. That's why the Pope is visiting the country. But the northern part of the country is majority Muslim, and that there are a lot of Islamic terrorists there, and they're targeting Christians. They're abducting them, murdering them, burning down their churches and schools. So there's a lot of horrific violence in that part of Cameroon. And there's another war situation between the government forces and English-speaking separatist militias, and Christians are trapped between the violence of those two groups. So when the Pope goes there, he will meet a lot of Christians who are just suffering as a result of these two violent situations in the country. So his visit to the country is of utmost significance.
Yeah, I've been reading that the Boko Haram and the Islamic State in West Africa, which many people actually in the United States now know exists in places like Nigeria. It's unfortunate that it's been spilling over into Cameroon as well, and we hope that the Holy Father can help with that situation. It's multiple conflicts that are going on there. I'd like to go on, though, and also talk about the other two countries, which are a little bit more, quite a bit different in the sense that they have connections, deep Christian connections. And I'd like to start with Equatorial Guinea. I did not myself know much about it. I was surprised to learn that it doesn't even lie on the equator. I thought maybe that it did, but it seems to have been part of Spain for a long time, and that there still continues to be a strong Spanish presence. Many of the people there speak Spanish, and of course, the Holy Father spent many years in Latin America, so he's almost a near native Spanish speaker, although he was born in the United States. Can you tell us a bit about the situation there in Equatorial Guinea?
Well, as you said, it's a Spanish-speaking country, and 80% of the population, I believe, is Catholic. And because of the Spanish connection, it used to be a Spanish colony. The Pope has deep spiritual and cultural connections with that country. And when he goes there, I think he will find a government that is struggling with some administrative and political issues. And thank God there's no jihadist insurgency there. But the problem is in Africa, because sub-Saharan Africa is the epicenter of jihadist violence targeting Christians, these insurgencies might spread to countries like the Guinea and Angola as well. So although the Christians there are safe for now, we don't know what will happen in the future. And as for Angola, it is also a very important country for the Catholic faith. Unfortunately, after they gained independence from the Portuguese in 1975, they suffered from a long civil war which ended in 2002. But the effects of that civil war linger on. So when he goes there again, he will find a country that is struggling with many structural issues and poverty as well. But the good thing is, Africa is a very resourceful, rich country and continent, and the church is growing there despite all the problems, and that is very inspiring. So the Pope's visit to all these countries is extremely important. But at the same time, I have spoken to church members there, and I've read many reports about the Christian persecution situation in those countries, and they really hope that the Pope will speak out about their sufferings as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you know, but I've written a book recently called "The Martyrs of the New Millennium," and in that book I tried to show how it is that many people in the United States, in particular, know about radical Islam insofar as it existed in the Middle East. But what they don't know is how it migrated to that part of Central Africa. And they hear about Nigeria because Nigeria has been producing so many people who are being killed and kidnapped and ran, et cetera. But it's very worrisome the way that this is that same kind of current is it's creeping into these countries, which are historically Christian, and it's also moving out into Asia and other countries farther away. And yet at the same time, one of the most, I think, hopeful signs is that Africa is one of the largest continents for Christians. I think there are 250 million Christians in Africa. And it's growing. It's one of the few continents on the face of the earth where Christianity is growing despite the persecution that many people are suffering there. Can you talk more broadly about this whole movement, this attempt by the Islamic State to create a caliphate in Africa? I've been hoping for years that the Vatican, and this Pope is relatively new, he's been only a Pope for 1 year, not even a year at this point. I've been hoping that they would recognize that there is this threat there that has moved on from where they thought there was a problem in the Middle East and is now in Africa. And though the blood of the martyrs is producing more Christians there, there's a situation that really needs to be spoken about. And in my judgment, that hasn't been spoken about enough.
I agree. Africa has more Christians than all other continents. So it's the most Christian continent in the world today. But there's also a lot of severe extreme Christian persecution as a result of jihadist or Islamic governments, as well as societies there. So in countries, in North African countries like Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, the persecution comes from the government as well as society. The Christians there don't have the freedom to to practice their religion safely and freely. And Muslims, unfortunately, face extreme risks if they decide to leave Islam and choose another faith. This is the case in Egypt, and this is the case in Algeria as well. And the Christians in those countries cannot open churches. It's almost impossible. The governments don't let them. But these countries used to be majority Christian before their Islamic conquest in the 7th century by Arab armies. So we also see that as a result of Islamic persecution against Christians, the demographics of nations can change easily.
I'm sorry, we had a slight technical bug there and we lost you for a minute, but we're happy that we're back. You were talking about the more general situation in Africa and how in the northern parts of Africa, even in places like Egypt, which has, of course, a long history of Coptic Christianity, it's hard for anybody to open a church, et cetera. Could you continue what you were saying before we had that little glitch?
Yes, in North Africa, in North African countries such as Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt, the Muslim citizens don't have the freedom to change their religion. I mean, they are imprisoned and arrested if they try to change their religion and openly express it, either in real life or online. And in Egypt, for example, there's a large Coptic Christian community, but hundreds of Coptic young girls and children have been abducted in recent years, and they've been raped and forcibly converted to Islam and forcibly married to Muslim men. They have this problem going on there. And Egypt used to be a majority Coptic country before the Islamic conquest of the 7th century. In Algeria, we just talked about it. Christians can't open churches. Their churches have been shut down, the Protestant churches. And the Muslims, when they try to change their religion, or when pastors, there's a pastor, for example, his name is Rashid Segir. He was sentenced to a year in prison for distributing Christian books in his bookstore. There are many cases like this in Algeria. And in the sub-Saharan Africa and in Central Africa, which is the epicenter of Christian persecution and violence, there are jihadist insurgencies in countries such as Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, and Cameroon, where the Pope will be visiting soon. So in all these countries, Christians are targeted with horrific violence by Islamic terrorist groups. Somalia, they're called Al-Shabaab, and the goal of this group is to exterminate Christianity from Somalia. If a Muslim converts to Christianity, and if Al-Shabaab learns about this, they will most likely be executed. In Sudan, there is a civil war between two Muslim forces, but Christians are trapped in that violence, and they are losing their lives and livelihoods because of the civil war. In Ethiopia, there is Islamic violence targeting Christians. In Eritrea, Christians, including church leaders, are arrested by the government. And in Nigeria, which is a majority Muslim country, there is a jihadist insurgency. And not only Christians, but also Muslims that jihadists believe are not following Islam closely, they are targeted as well. And they are forced to pay extremely high taxes to those terrorist groups. And majority Christian countries are also targeted, such as Cameroon and the Central African Republic. In the Central African Republic, for example, terrorists conquered the whole country except for the capital. And there's also another jihadist insurgency in Burkina Faso, and that is the majority Muslim country, but there are Christians there, and they're suffering as a result of this violence. So hundreds of thousands of people in Africa have either been murdered or forcibly displaced because of the jihadi violence, the Islamic violence targeting Christians. And this is a human rights emergency. And I think Western media and international media should pay more attention to what's happening in Africa, because although the church is growing, despite all this suffering and plight, they're also dying, and they're also losing their lives and livelihoods.
We're getting near the end of our time together. I like to keep these podcasts shorter so that people can actually listen to them and they won't have to take up too much of their day. But the Pope may not be able to say too much while he's in the situation in these various countries. It may have to be that after he gets back in Rome, he'll be able to make more general commentary. But what can he say, or what can he do you think? I know this is a hard question to answer, but if you were advising him or the Vatican, what do they need to do in order to respond to a situation that really is just horrifying by any civilized standards?
I think the Pope has the power, the authority, and the voice to help the persecuted church in Algeria. He can meet with the members or representatives of the closed churches, and he can meet with the Christians who have been prosecuted and jailed, who have received prison sentences and fines. For example, one case, Mohammed Dera, he is a Christian pastor, and he was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison for preaching outside his church, which had been closed by the authorities, and for giving a Bible to a listener. So the question is, if we want to determine whether there is religious liberty and religious pluralism in Algeria, can Muslims change their religion? Can Christians open churches? And if a Muslim decides to leave Islam, can he continue, or can they continue living their lives in a safe way, in dignity? So I think he can organize a press conference with some of the victims in Algeria. And this doesn't mean that he is hostile to Algeria. It means that he loves the country and he loves freedom for all Algerians, freedom of religion. Religious liberty is the most fundamental and God-given liberty that every single human being deserves. And he could talk with them, he can talk to the press in public and say that the Christians who are suffering here, the Muslims who are suffering here, or ex-Muslims, or Muslims who want to convert to Christianity or another religion, I care about them all, and their freedom and safety is important to me, just like my own safety, or even more important to me than my own safety. So he could call on the Algerian government to end the persecution, and he has, I think, the authority to change things for the better for Christians in Algeria, because it's not just Christians that are suffering. All ex-Muslims are suffering. The moment you express an opinion that is critical of Islam, is the moment you will be in trouble in Algeria. And I hope that not only the Hope, but other Western churches and church and Christian leaderships will speak out for their persecuted brothers and sisters in Africa.
Right. It's, I think very few people in the West know that even some Muslims who aren't sufficiently radical, according to the radicals, are themselves suffering. In places like Nigeria, there are actually people who are more moderate Muslims who are actually killed or persecuted as a result of their beliefs. Well, Uzay, thank you very much. When we put this up, I'm going to try to also link to the article that you wrote, which I want to say again, I thought was one of the best things that had been written in English in anticipation of the Pope's trip. So we thank you for being with us and spending some time. And let's all hope and pray that this visit to the Pope and the attempt that all of us are making to get these stories known better will actually help improve the situation of people who are being persecuted for their religion around the world. That's all the time we have for right now. I want to say again, I'm Robert Royal. I'm the president of the Faith and Reason Institute in Washington, D.C. These podcasts, which we are sending out under the rubric Faith Under Siege, are being produced in collaboration with Aid to the Church in Need USA in New York City. And we will be bringing you future reports, not just when things like a papal visit are taking place, on a regular basis this year, and we hope into the very near future, to make sure that all of us are aware of just how much religious believers are in danger in various countries around the world. Thank you again.
Until
And
next
we'll
time.
see you soon.